Interesting dress sense, but Bruce is one of the world's foremost experts in the history of computing. And it's not more pigs he keeps in that barn. Bruce has spent more than 10 years building a collection of computers that span the entire history of the machine's development, from $20 million supercomputers through the rapid development of the personal computers we take for granted today. Back in the 60s, Star Trek was telling the world that one day, computers would be multi-purpose, everyday tools
Computed and recorded, dear.
with which we might all constantly interact.
Computer, you will not address me in that manner.
The sexy technological innovation of the USS Enterprise had seduced the young Bruce Dammer and a generation of computer nerds.
When I was a kid, my brother and I used to lie in our bed and watch Star Trek. One of the things we always noticed, and that I always noticed, was Spock, whenever there was something to really be understood, he would go on the bridge over to a console that had like a hooded screen and look in, and blue light would shine on his face.
Oxygen, nitrogen atmosphere suitable for human life support.
And I always wondered, what is this guy seeing on this screen?
While Spock was staring into his mysterious database portal, the rest of the crew could be seen using user-friendly computers in every aspect of their lives. A revolutionary idea that would change everything.
So all the geeks in the 60s who were growing up saw that and said, we got to make that real in the 70s. And they did.
But it wouldn't happen overnight. Star Trek may have shown early computer pioneers what the future might be, but it didn't tell them how to get there. This would take some experimentation. The first attempt came in 1974 with a whopping great blue box that is widely seen as the first ever personal computer. But it's not quite the PC we take for granted today. It came as a highly intricate build-it-yourself kit, and once you had finished soldering its circuit boards together, users would find that it didn't actually really do anything because software hadn't been invented yet. Yes, it wasn't perfect, but for thousands of would-be tech types, it was a start. And thanks to its Trek fan inventor, Ed Roberts, it had a somewhat familiar-sounding name.
So here we have the Sputnik for the nerd generation. This is the Altair 8800, named after a solar system in Star Trek.
Head directly for Altair 6. Altair 6.
I think I'm going to get spacey.
This became the focus of many homebrew and personal computer clubs. Kids trying to figure out how to make this thing useful. And a couple of those kids were Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, and their version of the Altair Useful was the Apple computer. And Bill Gates and his guys wrote BASIC, the language for this thing, and they created a company called Microsoft. So the modern world came out of this unassuming blue box.
And the rest is Star Trek history. Armed with their Star Trek visions and very big brains, young enthusiasts like Bill Gates took what they had learned from fiddling around with Altair and set about bringing the personal computer into all of our lives. The guys went on to found Microsoft and Apple, Silicon Valley and the PC industry completely changing the whole world, making everyone rich beyond their wildest dreams. Back in the real world, computers had loads of room for improvement. Because while by the 80s they were selling in their millions, most people brought their gleaming new PC home and then put it on a desk and just sort of looked at it. Nobody had quite figured out yet how to make us want to spend any quality time with them. To do that, they'd have to be able to do something more exciting than write invoices. But someone was about to solve that little mystery.
I have a confession to make. Next Generation's my favorite Star Trek series. I actually think that they found a really nice balance between what was comprehensible to an audience back then and something which was just a little bit further ahead.
This is Steve Perlman, man who dreams that one day we will all live in perfect harmony with computers, just like on board the Enterprise. For the last 20 years, Steve has been at the forefront of computer technology in Silicon Valley, California. His success all started back in the late 80s when he was a principal scientist at Apple Computers, wondering what to do to make computers do stuff. And then one night, he swept away his hair and watched, you guessed it, The Next Generation.
these guys were dreaming of stuff that wasn't obvious and showing how it could be used. Now, they didn't know how to make a computer do this and how to figure out all the logistics of it, of course. I mean, that's our job.
Now Steve was about to be inspired when something Star Trek invented caught his eye.
Back then, Data was listening to many copies of music simultaneously played for the speakers.
Mozart's Jupiter Symphony in C major, Molto Vivace, and La Donna e Mobile.
The idea that he could call up any music he wanted on the computer in the Enterprise was a novel idea.
Computer, eliminate program 2.
Now, the music Data was listening to was effectively gazillions of megabytes of information, and yet was able to be accessed at the touch of a button. Seems simple to us now, but back then there was a slight problem. It was impossible.
I remember in 1987, we were about to introduce the Macintosh 2, and it was really the first personal computer that had stereo output. It sounds so trivial now, but it took an entire disc of the largest disc made just to play one single in stereo, and it took a state-of-the-art computer the day it was released in 1987.
There was a bit of a problem. So what did Steve do about it? Simple. Inspired by Star Trek, he helped develop a kind of software which allowed everyone to be as irritating and as noisy as Data, store up all their favorite tunes on their computers, and then access them any time. That software would, within a few years, become a part of nearly every single home computer in the world. That software is called QuickTime, a multimedia miracle that allows computers to digitally compress, store, and play all kinds of movie and audio files. Which beats carrying your record collection around in an old paper bag. But it didn't stop there. Steve's software would pave the way for the invention of a few small toys that few people really thought would take off. First, the MP3, and then a revolutionary music player that would transform the fortunes of Apple and be bought by 30 million people in just 4 years. Something called the iPod.
Am I talking too loud? Are we okay?
Steve's various inventions have so far earned him many millions of dollars, so you'd think after all that, you'd think he would be taking it easy. Or maybe not. You see, there's still one piece of Star Trek technology that Steve has a burning desire to make real.
In the 1980s, we were very excited about creating ubiquitous computing, getting audio on computers, getting video playing with QuickTime. But meanwhile, we were watching Star Trek Next Generation, and we were seeing something much more interesting than that called the holodeck.
The holodeck was a great big empty area of the ship, which during your day off, you could download any scenario you fancied from the ship's computer and become part of it.
The vial was placed in his hand after he died.
Why don't you come on in and take a look at my holodeck.
Today, Steve is convinced that he can make the holodeck a reality.
I'm going to regret this.
That's why he's developing a sophisticated motion capture system that feeds information from retroflective beads positioned on a subject's body into a computer that can then recreate a perfect 3D image of it in some imaginary world. One day, we will all entertain ourselves like this, according to Steve. Can't wait.